So games are cool. I might even go so far as to say that games are great, and yet despite how great games can be, the video game market often feels oversaturated. Countless titles release every day, only to be lost to the ether. Every now and then though, a game from out of nowhere breaks the mold, something that truly leaves a mark on video game history, as opposed to a small scratch on the surface. Now if you told me that, hey, I'm on the market for a game where I'm battling out of the underworld while traumatizing my in-game father as a way to gain catharsis for my childhood trauma inflicted upon me, that's... I mean, at first I'd be confused because that's just incredibly niche. But luckily for you, I've got just the game. Hades. It's Hades. This game impresses me to no end. In fact, I felt so inspired by this game with wild abandon I put everything else on hold and was compelled to start an entirely new series. Enter the first installment of One Perfect Game, a new on-again off-again series where I highlight games that I consider to be truly exceptional. The games on this list are, in my opinion, standard setters, ones that house themselves in the hearts and minds of players for ages to come. By textbook definition, if something is perfect, that means it is without flaw. But to be quite honest, that expectation is ridiculous nonsense. To me, something doesn't have to be flawless to be perfect. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I think that everyone has a game that they consider to be perfect to them, despite what someone else may think. This series is meant to put the spotlight on games where each element mixes together to create the ultimate concoction. In the end, producing a game that's just right. With all this said, here's why I consider Hades to be one perfect game.
All right, well now it's the top of the hour, and that means I think it's time for the Game Awards. Are you guys ready?
It's December 6th, 2018. Avid gamers from around the world were tuning into the Game Awards with an impressive lineup of both games to announce and absolute titans of the year to celebrate. It was a good year for gaming. God of War, Red Dead Redemption 2, and Spider-Man PS4 were just some of the monsters of titles that came out that year. There was some tough competition, with an even tougher act to follow. But the stage was set. Other than E3, which is honestly more mythological than Greek mythology at this point.
Yes, we're still hard at work on our next-gen RPGs, Starfield, and of course, Starfield.
The Game Awards is the perfect place to announce your upcoming titles. If you were there, you were bound to get a great deal of notoriety, be it good or bad. Then, out of nowhere, a little game called Hades was given a reveal trailer. The game advertised itself as a roguelike dungeon crawler where you play as Zagreus, the son of Hades, the Greek god of the underworld. Zagreus was pitched as a charming, hot-headed, and rebellious young god who sought to fight through his father's realm and break through to the surface. The game was being developed by a studio called Supergiant Games, who wasn't exactly unheard of, but was relatively underrated. They had some successful games on their repertoire, but not enough to be the talk of the town just yet. But they were about to be. Needless to say, Hades got a lot of attention very fast, and to add to this, early access to the game was dropped immediately after the trailer. And the reaction to the early access release was nothing short of immediate praise. Fans were raving about the fast-paced, intuitively designed, engaging game that they had their hands on. I mean, it was just pure, unadulterated chaos and fun. In only a few short days, players had mastered what there was to offer and pleaded for more. Over time, Hades would grow to be the game we now know it to be, with additional content added post-release to increase the longevity of the game. As of August 13th, 2021, Hades was out of early access and fully released on Steam, PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo Switch, with a total of over 1 million copies sold, which was an astronomical record for indie developers, and was praised by gamers and critics worldwide, as well as winning several accolades, honors, and awards over the years. Supergiant Games did what they set out to do, and if you feel further intrigued by the development process of the game, I'd highly recommend watching NoClip's documentary, Developing Hell. It's a wonderful insight into the process of making Hades and the beautiful people that did it. Alright, we have the groundwork of how Hades was made and its subsequent success, but what made the game so great in the first place? What gives this game its perfect status? What does it bring to the table? One of the best ways to begin analyzing something is by starting at its core. What makes it function? For Hades, we'll start with the mechanics. Roguelike games aren't exactly underrated, but they're often overlooked. I myself can attest to this, as in my lifetime I haven't played many. But out of most video game genres, I'd say they're more on the niche side. They're punishing, to say the least. Roguelikes are often defined as dungeon crawler games that feature permanent death of the player, which is a major setback and could really deter the faint of heart. They're typically for the players that seek a fast-paced, enemy-heavy, and adrenaline-pumping challenge. High risk, high reward. However, like all things, there will always come those who don't appreciate it for what it is. I swear, there's always some chump in the back of the room that just has to complain about something they don't like. I mean, just take a look at this guy, for instance. I hate roguelikes, and so should you. As a rule, I don't play anything that brands itself as a roguelike or a roguelite. Occasionally something that comes along that looks really pretty, or has a lot of buzz, or looks like it might have other elements that make up for the many downsides of roguelikes, and I always regret doing so. And this is why I hate roguelikes. Most of the time, it is impossible to win a roguelike because the random elements align in one of a million different ways that make it unsolvable. It's like having a book of 100 mazes, and 99 of those mazes are unsolvable. But the mazes are big and complex enough that you have to spend a few hours on a maze before you realize it's unsolvable. Supergiant understood these concerns and managed to shape Hades to where it still appealed to those who appreciated the genre, but also made it more accessible. To quote Supergiant, roguelike games can be known for their steep difficulty, and indeed, Hades can present a considerable challenge. However, one of our foremost design goals on the project was to open up the thrills of roguelike games to more players. To that end, and knowing that challenge is relative from player to player, the game offers a wide range of difficulty modifiers as well as permanent progression systems, alongside plenty of characters to interact with when you're not trying to battle out of hell. Now, most publishers or advertisers say what they say to get their games sold, and often don't hold true to their word. I have a few publishers in mind when I think of this, and I know you do too. The same cannot be said for Supergiant and their dedication to Hades. Whenever Zagreus fails his escape attempts, yeah, he's thrown back to the House of Hades to start all over again. However, it isn't as cut and dry starting all over as one would think. As you progress, you gain a number of things. Points that permanently upgrade Zagreus and his abilities, gems that can be used to renovate the underworld, new weapons as the story progresses, new items or abilities that assist you, the list goes on and on. The game even seems to reward you for dying, because almost each and every time you do, the world state in the House of Hades changes, introducing a new character, or granting a new weapon, or progressing the narrative in some way. Despite the recursion that roguelikes get flack for, Hades makes it interesting by always evolving the world around you. There's never a dull moment in the game, there's always something new. That level of consistently engaging elements ensures that players will come back again and again, and at times even goaded me into allowing Zagreus to lose, just so that I could quickly go back and see how the story progressed while he was gone. The underworld is an expansive and seemingly endless dungeon, filled with monsters, demons, and all sorts of obstacles for Zagreus to overcome. Given that you're basically the Greek god equivalent of Doom Guy, you need to be armed to the teeth, because you're gonna die. A lot. Thankfully though, through trial and error, there are a number of ways to circumvent your inevitable trip back down the river Styx. For instance, you can permanently upgrade stats to give you a much needed boost, like a health upgrade or another life. But if you aren't satisfied with the way you pummel wretches into Hades 2 Electric Boogaloo, you can grab something else to give you an edge. You can choose from a variety of weapons, consisting of a sword, a spear, a shield, a bow, gauntlets, and a gun. Yeah. Should you find your present means of double death dealing a bit antiquated, you can modernize your playstyle with a rifle fit for a deity. Each weapon feels unique and tailored to a specific playstyle, and the game at times encourages you to step out of your comfort zone and try out another weapon, with the promise of additional rewards if you do. However, a god's own power can only go so far. At times, we must call upon the help of others to succeed where we cannot. Enter the boon system, which is arguably my favorite part of the game. The gods of Olympus have taken pity on their kindred destructive anger baby below the earth, and seek to help Zagreus escape the underworld. Though their assistance is limited in the realm of Hades, they can still offer their powers to Zagreus through the usage of boons. Yeah, in case this game didn't sound cool enough already, you can be a supercharged smoothie of heavenly powers, pumping a metric fuckton of god energy into Zagreus to make him nearly unstoppable. Each time a god offers their powers to you, you can select a number of boons that do things, like upgrading one of your abilities, giving you another dash, giving you more health, and so on and so forth. Each boon is unique, all being tailored to the god that offers it to you. For instance, Dionysus' boons tend to have an effective hangover on your enemies, which causes them to take damage over time, while Ares has a distinct effect of doom, or what I like to call fuck you, that devastates your opponents after you hit them. Poseidon invokes splash effects that knocks your opponents away, and Artemis flings arrows while giving you a higher chance to deal critical damage to your enemies, and you get the idea. So long as your boons don't replace another's effects, you can have as many as you want at a time. So by the end of your run, you're an absolute monster of a being holding a carousel of abilities granted to you. I mean, quite literally by the end of a run, I've found myself holding almost too much power, so there's an added element of trying different boons to make Zagreus as overpowered as the game allows. As gaining the god's favor is paramount in this game, you also need to take care not to invoke their wrath. The gods themselves are, in tandem with mythology, vindictive, sensitive beings. There will come a specific situation where you're put into a room and forced to choose between two of the gods that are already helping you. Whichever one you don't choose will consider you a supreme asshole and attack you in a brief but rigorous challenge wave. But if you survive, they grant you a powerful boon as recompense. So in this situation, it's the high risk, high reward that roguelikes are known for. Working in tandem with the gameplay, the level design and dungeon layout also shouldn't be ignored. Each room is packed with its own set of unique enemies, traps, or treasures. The enemy variety is impressive, with the player having to alter their playstyle on the fly to adapt to the situation. The layout and room order changes every time as well. Sometimes you may not see a boss, mini-boss, or even a certain enemy type for another few attempts, so you constantly have to be on your toes as you won't know what happens next. At the end of each room, there are usually 2 or more paths to choose from, which tell you what kind of rewards you'll get. These can range from a number of things, like gold to buy temporary boosts, boons, points, and more. So, seeing a preview before you go into a room is a good way to have the player try to map out how they want their build to go this time around. Maybe you want the assistance of Aphrodite instead of Zeus this time, or you think you could go for more points as you have enough gold. The level of player investment accentuates the constant draw of every escape attempt. And for those who don't like themselves, who find Hades just not hard enough and somehow still seek an even greater challenge, there are a variety of ways to increase the difficulty, including adding modifiers to almost every aspect of the game. In exchange for this higher difficulty, you'll get rewarded with more ways to upgrade your weapons and spruce up the underworld. Every time you attempt to escape the underworld, your build is likely vastly different from the last, as you're trying out a different weapon, or you increase a different stat, or you're rolling with different boons. The possibilities are quite endless, so when you finally beat that boss that was giving you trouble for the longest time, you know what playstyle seems to be working for you, and what kinks to work out the next time through. It becomes easier to pick and choose the stuff that works, and what things you either need to work on or should just avoid entirely. Despite the genre often getting more critique than praise, Hades reinvents it in such an enthralling way that keeps you on your toes constantly, managing to maintain a consistent energy throughout each escape attempt. There's a clear sign that Hades was meticulously designed with all the love and care Supergiant could muster. The mechanics are fun, easy to understand, and fluid, and the game holds potentially hundreds of hours of content to unravel. But mechanics alone aren't what makes a game perfect. That's to say, the machine won't work without something to power it, and that's where the narrative comes in.
Where do you think you are? Who do you think you're talking to? Nobody gets out of my domain, whether alive or dead. You wish to learn the hard way? Fine. Then go. Get out. Don't let me stop you.
Wasn't planning on it, Father.
The story of Hades is a story of endless plight. With the help of his allies in the underworld and the Olympians who seek to unite with him in the heavens, Zagreus uses every tool at his disposal to be free of the dark below, no matter how many times he dies. That is the base description of the game's plot. Despite the desperate mission and the more somber and hellish setting, the game actually takes a more lighthearted approach than one would expect. The game is funny. I'd even go so far as to say it's funny as hell. Thank you. Thank you. Alright, that was a pun. You guys like puns? Okay. Thank you. We have fun. And even fourth wall breaking, as Zagreus always seems to comment on whatever the narrator of the game has to say.
With its just right softness and death-themed embroidery, the new bedding of Prince Zagreus is the envy of all those who wish to rest in peace.
Already bought it. No need to sell me on it, old man.
Supergiant also takes the beloved tales of Greek mythology and reinvents them with their own natural twists and turns, while fine-tuning them to fit a more modern audience. Take the myth of Sisyphus, for example, a man who cheated death, and, in spite, Hades doomed him to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity, only for it to come crashing down just before he reaches the top. Sisyphus is a character in this game, and actually seems to be pretty okay with his fate, as long as he's with the riveting conversationalist known as Boldy.
To our most famous boulder. Well?
Oh, look how happy Boldy is.
When asked about the narrative creation process of Hades, Greg Kasavin, the creative director on the game, had this to say. We decided to put a more modern feeling about the Hades character in our game, and because the people who are creating this game are modern people, it was interpreted with a bit of a modern style. But we wanted to respect the original mythology and do our best to preserve the characteristics. That's courtesy to the character leading the story of our game and the core of this game's world. So keeping the balance between the modern feeling, the story's diverging points, and the original myth while creating arts and sources was very difficult. Hades seems to deliver exactly what was promised, with an invigorating reinvention of the old myths while also managing to make the themes more applicable to its players. Mythology buffs will find themselves catching little or interesting references to popular stories or characters, and if you know the myth, you may be able to guess what happens next. Zagreus isn't a character that's often talked about in Greek mythology, and quite frankly, there seems to be a great deal of debate on what he's the god of to begin with. While the story does address this, I find using a vague mythological character as the player's point of view an excellent narrative decision. Telling the story of Hades through Zagreus' eyes gives us a fresh look into mythology, and his unfamiliarity with the elements around him often supplants that fish out of water effect that classic fictional stories do so well. It's a great way to reintroduce stories that have been favorites for ages while also making it easy to understand. And while Zagreus steals the show, let's not overlook the rest of the characters in the game. Hades is rich with an incredible supporting cast, each with their own interesting backstories and personal plights. Every character has their own unique stake in the narrative, and brings their own personality to the table, from the brashness of Poseidon to the complex and vague coalescence of grunts and groans that is Charon, ferryman of the dead. So profound. Every character has a compelling and nuanced tale to tell, through which Zag's own character is emboldened as he attempts to help them in any way he can. In the eyes of his father, he may seem like nothing but a young fool, but through his actions, Zagreus is shown to have a great care for others. The player can gift things to other characters, which will gain their favor and even their assistance later on in the game if Zagreus helps them in something they need to get done. After all, Zagreus wouldn't get nearly as far as he did without the help of those around him. Though most of the game is advertised as being solely about the daunting task of Zagreus, players will slowly start to realize it's about a whole lot more. For those who haven't played it yet, I won't go into too much detail, but it's about loving others and knowing when to let them go. About defining the fine line between looking out for someone and controlling them, letting them forge their own path. But it's also about being able to admit when you're at fault, and recognizing responsibility for your actions or mistakes. Hades manages to tell a beautifully poignant story that's veiled behind a lighthearted, rebellious tale. It's chock full of interesting characters and dynamics, side storylines that keep you coming back to see through, the most complex and impressive dialogue tree I have ever seen that alters itself depending on everything you've done in the game, and overall is an achievement that is nothing short of commendable. Even death has a narrative relevance, and the game will continue long after you finish it, so don't close out of it just yet. Okay, we have our core mechanics of the game and a narrative to make it work. But at times, appearances can be everything. The best way to display your work is to tie it all up in a neat little bow, and that's where the art comes in. And let me clarify. When someone says art, your immediate thought, including mine, is likely visual art. While true, it isn't just that. It's every aspect of the design. It's the acting, it's the music. So when I bring up the art, I'm speaking of the conglomerate beauty of expression. Visually, the game is beautiful. The art style in Hades is just so unique, with each part of the underworld and its inhabitants all feeling very distinct and easily identifiable from one another. Every crack and crevice feels meticulously crafted and attentively designed. The game brings a bouquet of visuals to the table, with a plethora of breathtaking environments and fun characterizations of beloved characters. And in case you failed to notice, every character in this entire game is hot as all hell. I'm not even trying to make a pun this time, it's just an indisputable fact that the gods scored big on the genetic jackpot. Especially one of them, who I'm sure you all know very well for their looks. Charon. Oh man, what a catch. Despite the considerable cast of characters all making me feel insecure about how attractive they are, each character is unique and immediately recognizable and distinguishable from one another. They all have very intricate and aesthetically pleasing designs which basically scream their personality. Though their lines are well written and their designs are well done, they wouldn't be as good as characters as they are without the voice talent behind them.
Ugh, blasted ghost minotaur. That's probably the one.
I can't help but be inspired by the incredible work of the cast. Each voice behind the character is just as distinct as their design, with all of them having their own quirks and character traits that, while true to their myths, are portrayed in a cheesy, hyperbolic way.
Big crowd, huh?
What ho! That is a handsome spear you doubtless claimed deceitfully from some more worthy bearer than yourself.
Oh, this old thing. How nice of you to notice. It once belonged to the hero Achilles. A little past your time, but maybe you've heard of him, seeing as he's much more famous than you ever were.
Every actor brings their absolute A game and makes the jaw-droppingly extensive and almost never-ending dialogue tree an absolute pleasure to go through. One could argue, though, that the true momentum of art, the fuel to the flame of creativity, is music. And the soundtrack of Hades is one of, if not the biggest strength of the game. It is just such a bop, not to mention very anachronistic with the setting. The composer and audio director of the game, Darren Korb, described it as Mediterranean prog rock Halloween, which honestly, I don't even know what that means, but he's definitely right. Korb gives us a mystifying score that perfectly complements the character of Zagreus and the tone of the game, feeling both haunting and somber while also stirring courage and gusto in the hearts and minds of players. And in case you didn't know, Korb also voices 2 characters in the game, one of those being Zagreus himself. That's pretty cool. Stand-up guy. So then, what is Hades? At the end of the day, Hades is a passion project done right. It's an incredible game that rose to stardom due to its immediate draw and enticing gameplay, with every element of the game working together like a fine dinner meal. It was at the time the smallest person in the room, and yet had the most to say, and eventually everyone listened. It isn't every day that indie games rise to the top, because today everything feels bogged down by AAA titles and pay-to-win cash grabs. I feel nothing but appreciation for Hades, for its engaging mechanics, compelling narrative, and sublime art direction, for reminding me why I love games. So, I extend my utmost gratitude. To Amir, to Greg, to Jen, to Darren, and to the entire Supergiant Games team, thank you. Thank you for making Hades one perfect game.
I think that Hades is a perfect game, but what do you think? What games do you think are perfect, and what should I do next? Feel free to let me know in the comments below, and I may just add it to the list. For the long-time spacers, I appreciate your patience, and I hope you enjoyed what took me quite a minute to get out. The point of one perfect game is to cultivate positivity for the games we love as opposed to critiquing them all the time, so hopefully this is a breath of fresh air for you. I won't be substituting this series for my regular content, but I'd like to do it now and again just so that I can talk about my favorite games, and maybe yours too. I have quite a long list of games that I want to cover at this point, so be on the lookout for that. If you're new here, I hope you enjoyed this just the same, and if you're still listening, you have my thanks. Additionally, I took so long on this video that instead of thanking everyone for 200 subscribers, I'm now thanking you all for 300, and I'm ecstatic to say that 400 seems to be on the horizon. I'm nothing but thankful for all of your support. My most recent video is doing a lot better than I expected, and I'm really grateful. I don't know what's so appealing about watching me be horrible at video games, but I'm glad you're here. Be sure to love yourself and be kind to those around you. I'll be seeing you again soon. Later, Spacers.